This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, CharMane, aka MixedGirlMane. And this is episode 68. I'm so excited about this episode. My guest this week, I just got done with the final edit of it, so I'm still kind of living off the high of that episode. I got to relive something that I enjoyed experiencing 2 weeks ago, getting to recut the episode. My guest this week is Sarah Lotus. I have referred to her before. She is a Patreon sponsor of Militantly Mixed, and she and I engage quite frequently on Instagram. She's recently tagged Militantly Mixed and myself in a couple of her posts. If you're not following her on Instagram, I'm going to put a link in the show notes so that you can. She's at Sarah Lotus Garrett on Instagram. Sarah is a recently certified life coach, and she centers her practice around mixed race identity and assisting interracial families with how to raise their mixed race children in a thoughtful and empowering, affirming type of way. So this is something I'm very passionate about, just as a mixed person who grew up without that support growing up, even though I had mixed race parents. And why I have chosen to be child free, it's still something I'm very passionate about in terms of finding ways for interracial couples who do have mixed race kids to learn how to help their child maneuver in their identity as they grow up. I think now that we have a couple of generations of legal, quote unquote, legal mixed race children, it is time that we should be able to affirm their identity as mixed race kids as they grow up. And that is some of the work that Sarah is doing. So you'll hear me talk about her as a mixed race superhero towards the end of the show. And that's because I really do think that there is something super heroic about work that is centered around mixedness, because we didn't have it when we were growing up. And so now we can do that for the future generations. Before I get into the episode, though, there's a few things I do want to explain for context that I think might be helpful for the audience who isn't based here in the United States, or because American education system is not the best, you may have not heard of Loving versus Virginia. And this is something we reference in the episode. Sarah refers to herself as a post-Loving baby. And what that means is Loving versus Virginia was a landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court, which struck down all state laws that banned interracial marriages. And this was effective 1967. So it wasn't that long ago that interracial marriages here in the United States was illegal. The only cases in which that was not enforced necessarily was military families. So I come from both sides of my family are military families. My Caucasian American grandfather was stationed in Japan during the Korean War. He married my Japanese grandmother and brought her to the States, and they had mixed race children. My Black American grandfather was stationed in England around the same time, Korean War. He met and married my Caucasian British Nana and brought her to the United States and started having mixed race babies. And that predates Loving versus Virginia. And the reason why that is okay, quote unquote okay, is that military families were sort of given an unspoken pass or voucher to be married interracially, because they kind of thought of it as, well, you're risking your life for the country. This is the least we can do, is allow you to bring your brown and yellow wives to the States and have your little hybrid children. They made Asian wives take classes on domesticity to teach them how to be American domestics in the household. My Caucasian Nana did not have to do that because she spoke English and she was white, even though she was a foreigner when she came to the States. So my situation is different from Sarah's in that my family predates Loving versus Virginia, but they were still sort of quote unquote sanctioned interracial marriages. They weren't illegal interracial marriages before 1967. But Sarah is post Loving versus Virginia, which means that post 1967, when the anti-miscegenation laws were struck down, her parents legally, quote unquote, legally were able to have her. It sounds terrible to say that because it's not that long ago. I am also a post-loving baby, but I'm 10 years post-loving. So by the time I come around, there are a little bit more mixed race people, the people are getting used to us existing. And because I also grew up in a military family, I grew up around a lot of mixed race people. So my experience is always a little bit different than many of my guests, because most of my guests grow up in mixed isolation. And that's something we get into here in this episode. So I just wanted to kind of explain that for any of the audience members that may not be familiar with Loving versus Virginia, because we don't pause in the middle of the discussion to explain what it is. We just talk about it because we both know what it is. So that was one. And there is a couple of references that towards the end of the episode where we reference Sarah being in Italy, but in no other part did we reference it, but it sounds like we had. And that's because Sarah and I talked for about 2.5 hours. We were only supposed to talk for about 50 minutes, but we ended up talking for 2.5 hours. And I took out a big section of the discussion, which I am going to release in the future, because we talked about some really good things, code switching and racism, your views on racism depending on where you are. So I kind of referenced it towards the end of this episode, but that's because I had to cut out a whole bunch of stuff, and I will release those later because I didn't want to put out a 2.5 hour episode. All right. So I am really excited. I can't wait for you to hear this episode. Before I do that, I do want to make a couple, me, I got to talk for about 15, 20 minutes, right? I do want to make a couple announcements. First of all, I want to say a really heartfelt thank you to the audience for sticking with me and helping me to continue to grow during this time. I know over the last 4 or 5 months, I've been, on and off in terms of energy and excitement and things like that. I've had a very difficult time in my personal life, having lost a job unexpectedly and not knowing if I was going to be potentially homeless by the end of any month because things were really tight. I've had a lot of friends and family come through and help get me through this period of time. And I did start a temp job a couple weeks ago. It was very low paying at the time I started it. Since I've been there, they realize how much more work they need and how much more capable I am. I fought for myself. I've gotten a raise and I've gotten an extension on that contract. So I at least know that for the next 3 or 4 months, I'm not going to have to stress out about where I'm getting my paycheck from. And so I hope that translates into the energy that I exhibit on this show will change quite a bit because I'm not going to have that burden on my mind. Last week I did say that I had just been hit with some bad news that makes me feel like I don't even know what's next coming. And that was before I found out the good news about me. But it was the case that my husband is now in the same boat that I was over the summer, in that he's got to be looking for a new teaching position for next semester, which is probably unlikely. So it's making LA a real challenge for us because we started out really high and I was making over 6 figures or I was making 6 figures and he was an adjunct and, we were paying the bills and everything was fine. And then a bunch of stuff happened and now we have no money. So, life has been difficult here in Los Angeles. And I know that you've heard me be upset about that for the last few months, but you've stuck it out with me and you've supported me. You've sent me wonderful messages of support. Some of you have donated to help ease some of the burdens that I've been experiencing, and I'm just so appreciative. I know that when you come to Militantly Mixed, you're coming to hear a show centered around mixedness. You're coming to hear the stories of other mixed race people, and the fact that you have heard me pull away from that just to talk about what's been heavily stressed in my life and still stuck it out with me, I'm really appreciative of. So thank you everybody for doing that. Hopefully, at least for the next couple months, that won't be the case. And I'll be able to recenter around mixes again. And then finally, Patreon sponsorship. We're still at $275 for the month. This is the last Tuesday of October, so we got a few more days left to go to hit the $300 goal for the end of October. So if you can, drop in $1, $5, $10, or hit the whole $25 to help us hit the goal. Because we got momentum. We've hit the goal every month until now. So if we can hit it, we can keep on a winning streak. And I'll be honest, I have hit critical mass in terms of what I'm capable of doing for the shows without without support. I'm getting to the point I absolutely do need to hire somebody who can help support me, either on the logistics of the stuff related to the show, the social media, the catching up with things, or the editing itself. Things are starting to get pretty stretched. I do produce and edit all 4 shows on ManeHustle Media Network: Militantly Mixed, Black Radical Queer, Blurred Comics, and By Furious. And when I was unemployed, I took on some editing freelance work, which is pretty heavy labor as well, especially because I'm not the host and I don't have anything but the audio files to go off of. So I'm not canceling that just because I've taken on a job. I'm going to fulfill my commitment, but doing that, editing about 6 or 7 shows a week potentially, while also working full time and trying to market the shows every week. You may have noticed in the last week or so, I haven't been doing much on social media, and that has to do with just when can I do it? I have no idea. So it's been hard to even market the episodes each week as well. So it'll be pretty tight until we do achieve at least that 500 a month. But even then, I think because I've taken on more, I'm probably going to have to push my goal earlier to try to get me above that, so I can actually hire somebody who can and pay them what they're worth. That's the other part. I don't want to just pay someone what I can pay them. I want to pay them what they are worth, and with your support, we will be able to do that. So if you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/militantlymixed. We have levels as low as $1 to as high as anything you wish. I do also want to start a Patreon exclusive monthly episode, but again, I'm adding more to what I already have in terms of limited time. So until I get that support, it's going to be very difficult to be able to do that. But I appreciate the support that I've received so far. And I'm really overwhelmed that it's happening. I know I'm lucky in terms of other podcasters in the support that I receive. So I appreciate the audience. Continue to tell your friends, share the episodes that are meaningful to you. I do appreciate you and the messages that I've been receiving. I mean, I wish I could actually just fly and meet every single person and be there for them when they're in the moments that they're in that cause them to email me, because I know how much we need each other. We definitely need to have a support system, a community of mixed race people who understand the context of our lives, and I'm trying to do that. I just need a little bit more support to be able to do it, because as of right now, I've hit the ceiling in terms of what I can do as a solo person. Don't forget to follow us on social media: Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. And if you want to reach out to me directly, you can email me at charmaine@militantlymixed.com. That's S as in Sam, HAR, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, E, at militantlymixed.com. And, let me know how the show's impacting you. If you want to subscribe, rate, and review on whichever podcatcher you are listening to us on, that also helps other people see that we exist. So if people are out there feeling isolated in mixedness, we might pop up as a suggestion if you rate and review the show on whichever platform you are listening to us on. I think that's good. So without further ado, please help me welcome Sarah Lotus to the Militantly Mixed family, and just know that this will not be the only time she will be on the show. Pew, 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 pew. All right, and this week we are joined by Sarah Lotus, who is actually a listener of the show, but also a supporter of the show. And we've gotten to speak before about projects that Sarah is working on in Mixedness. Sarah, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here. And my name is Sarah Lotus, and I was born in San Francisco in 1969, right after Loving, the Loving. I'm a Loving generation baby. My mom is white. My dad is Black, and I grew up without my dad around. So it was just me and my mom and my older brother. And my grandparents. I grew up in total whiteness in a place called Marin County, California. So I grew up in a little place called San Anselmo, and then a little bit in San Geronimo Valley. So super duper white. And Yeah, that's about it right there in terms of my background.
So when you said that earlier when we spoke that you grew up or that you were named in a hippie time, and then you said I grew up in Marin County, I was like, oh, yeah. Post-loving Marin County makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It was absolute hippieville.
Growing up in total whiteness, I think, is a thing about a lot of biracial folks, black and white biracial folks that I've spoken to for the sake of the show, is that many of us with black and white backgrounds do grow up with the white side of our family or the lighter side of our family and don't have a whole lot of access to our blackness. Growing up in that environment, what was it like for you to be a brown kid in a white space?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, I think at a very young age, I went into sort of like went into hiding. So I think I realized really young that the safest way for me to proceed was to fit in. And so I just did what everybody else around me was doing, and I didn't ask any questions, and I tried not to make any problems. And I think it resulted. Actually, I realized recently that it resulted in sort of like a lifelong rebellion, because I have always felt, or I had always felt, I've done a lot of work recently, so I had always felt like I was not being seen.
Right.
And I think just because of my inherent character, I just hated that. And so I was always sort of stomping my feet about other unrelated things to being unrelated.
You were working it out in other areas.
Yeah, especially during adolescence, that started, a little bit more aggressively. But yeah, and I think a lot of that was about trying to be seen in some way, because you're seen. I wasn't given any space to be me as a mixed person. Of course, I was perceived as Black. So, and in that period, I experienced a lot of aggression, a lot of really racist aggression. And, but I'm not Black, I'm mixed, and I grew up with my mom, who I loved, who I look into the face of the woman that is everything to me, and she's white. So I'm definitely not Black, but I'm not white. And there was also no space for me to be mixed. So I really wasn't being seen.
Especially and not to say that there weren't mixed people before loving, but specifically for American culture, being a post-loving baby, you are a beta tester of what is this identity, especially here in America. What is this identity? Because prior to loving, if you were so pale you could pass, then you behaved as white for safety. Yeah. If you were so dark that you couldn't pass as white, you were Black. That was just it. The one drop rule was something the white people created, but the Black people internalized so much so that is now a part of our culture, in which if we see Blackness, even a hint of it in someone, we welcome them into the fold, because we know that there's no home really for mixedness and that space. But you being from that first generation of I can't even believe that you have to say these words, post legalized mixed race children. You are experiencing things, and the people around you are experiencing something that they have never had to really deal with or anything. And they decide your identity for you. This is something mixed people, that's all we talk about, is how people have decided our identity for us. And especially for what I've noticed, which is different from my experience as a triracial person who presents really ambiguous, for biracial folks, you are one or the other, or you are Mexican. And that is all you get, especially here in California. I say specifically Mexican because of California. But for you to be accused, I'm using the word intentionally, to be accused of being Black when you are mixed Black and white, growing up around whiteness, you don't have access necessarily to what they mean when they say Black.
No, I mean,
but you're held to the standards
absolutely.
of their expectations of Blackness.
Absolutely.
And that is so damaging for a child who is trying to figure out who the hell they are, looking like they do when they have mothers that look the way that their mothers look, and all kinds of stuff. So I hear you speaking, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, all these things that I understand for the experience of my mom and my dad, who also were, well, they're slightly pre-loving. They're like 6 and 8 years pre-loving, but they're military children. So that's how that one works.
Micro.
It's its own bubble, yeah. The past, and I've gone to several events where they've talked about how military mixed children, they basically got a voucher to allow themselves to have these mixed families in the U.S. military.
I think I remember you telling me about that.
It's a whole thing, and the more I hear about it, the more my family starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So investigating the generations that come ahead of you actually, I think, does help figure out some of your identity. It certainly has done a lot for me while I've started to do it.
Absolutely.
But in your case, I really want to get into this because we've touched on loving generation a little bit here and there throughout the show, but not really with someone who really is like from that first generation and ready to, like, their whole experience is sort of based on this. Yeah. What was your awareness, I guess, of loving then as you were growing up? Is that something you actually figured out more as an adult, or did you know about it growing up?
Absolutely zero. I mean, we didn't ever talk about race in my house or in my family that I remember. I remember being treated in a different way because I was brown, than my mom was treated. I remember just knowing I was really different from the people around me. Right. But we never talked about the laws before or being mixed.
She didn't talk to you about why you received stares and things like that?
No, oh my gosh, absolutely not. And it's ironic because, they were both really progressive. My dad was like a free jazz musician. My mom was a total hippie beatnik. And they focused more on the fact that they were mixing.
Right.
And not on the fact that they had created a little mixed person.
That's actually an interesting idea. Are they thinking that they are combating racism to a degree by creating a mixed baby?
Yeah, but it doesn't center mixedness at all.
At all, right? Okay, no. Yeah.
This is something like activism and hope for the future and being open-minded and those ideas. But it does not at all look at mixed experience.
Right. I never even thought about the early generation having mixed babies as activism.
I mean,
this
I don't hold that.
I need to deal with now.
I don't think that it was like, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for anybody,
sure,
but
right.
I don't think it was a general, like, I'm going to do this as an active, as an action towards activism, but it definitely contributes to your identity as a person who is open-minded and progressive and certainly not racist and all these other things that lend themselves towards activism. So yeah, absolutely. I do think
even accidental activism, is a thing that happens. And I do wonder if there were people in that generation that kind of had that idea, or if it's just, free love was a thing and it was a time when we were trying to be open and boom, I got a mixed baby.
Sure there are there are many different layers to it. I imagine there are many different layers. My parents were deeply in love. Period. So there's that too, Yeah. But there was no reference to talking about or thinking about even the perspective of this little mixed baby that you've made and where they're growing up and what they're growing up in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the common thread of a lot of mixed generations, even for me, so I'm 10 years post-loving, not aware of loving until I was an adult. And then And then once I realized it, once I was aware of it, stuff started to click into my head about, say, my grandparents, really, especially my dad's parents. My dad's father was Black American. His mother was Caucasian British. And I always thought it was more radical that they were married than my Japanese grandmother and my white grandfather, because that seemed very a version of colonialist, for a white soldier to go to a place and bring back a brown wife or a yellow wife in this particular case. Like, so in that case, it didn't seem very radical at all. And in fact, seemed very oppressive, but my grandfather was out of the picture by the time I came around, pretty much. On my dad's side, though, they were also broken up by the time I came around, but I was still around them when I was younger. And I kept thinking, like, how crazy was it that my British white grandmother, like, married this black as night, dark,
my dad is really
man,
dark,
that kind of thing or whatever. And I'm just like, wow, this is a big deal. And then, but I wasn't seeing a lot of the racism that even my Nana had until I got, like, I know there were things that made me uncomfortable and that I didn't understand, but I needed adult context and learning to start to process some of the stuff that my Nana was doing.
Way too much for a child to manage on their own.
One thing I will say about my family that I have found was different than a lot of the mixed people that I know now is that while they didn't prepare me for people dealing with my mixedness, they at least talked about race in a way that allowed me to understand racism. So, it took a while. It took until my first racial incident. But they did eventually, they would say, oh, this is happening because racism and blah, 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 blah. So I at least had that bit. That was a little bit helpful, I think,
very
rather
helpful.
than sweeping it under the rug. Because like on my Japanese side, they definitely don't want to talk about it. We're not talking about it. All the thing we knew is that on the Japanese side, being black was bad. So we didn't talk about being black. Like that was what we knew on that side. On the Black and British side, though, it was like, yeah, people are going to look at us weird because they don't understand us. And basically my Nana was like, fuck them. This is my family. And yet she still did really racist things towards black people, brown people. And it was this weird thing that I never really started to grasp until I was an adult. With your family, though, and I think this is another thing that's uncomfortable for us mixed folks to talk about, because we don't want to come off as like we're bashing our family in any way, shape, or form. But being the first generation who's really legitimately stepping out and doing this post-loving, they're, like I said, accidental activists, I think. They don't realize that they're doing a really big thing maybe they do because they're probably dealing with some racism, but they don't realize that what's happening in creating this mixed child is a child who is got to try to figure out how to maneuver three kinds of spaces. The white space that they're growing up in, I think in your case, the black space that people are assuming they are, but don't have access to. And then also, how do I get to be me? How do I get to be both, while I'm walking around these things? And the kids just aren't prepared. The parents don't know how to talk about it because they don't have a shared experience.
Right.
So why talk about it? It'll be fine. They're kids. It'll be fine. And we go on with our lives. And I think a lot of people get nervous about, I don't want to hold my mother or father, whoever is the white parent, to some kind of standard that is probably impossible in that early generation of
I think
mixed folks.
Yeah.
I think now there's no excuse. I mean, from the way I feel, like mixed people been here for a while, we're out here. Don't think we're that weird. We're not really that weird. There's a lot of us. You can fucking talk about it now, parents. But back then, how did you talk about it was the thing. Like now I think there's more tools and resources to be able to talk about it. But back then, how did you talk about this? How did you prepare your kids? And the answer is you didn't talk about it and you didn't prepare your kids.
No, I mean, I don't even know if my mom thought of me as mixed. I mean, I would have to ask
That's a thing too.
Like, I guess she did, but like, she never talked about me, or we never talked about me being mixed until I was in, I think, like a senior in high school. She joined. It was like she had an awakening, and she was like, "Oh my God, I have mixed children." And she started this like multicultural group of moms, and she started inquiring about my mixedness. Like, what's it like to be mixed? I remember she made this video where she was, sat me down with the camera and was asking me all these questions about being mixed. And I just had zero language.
Right.
To talk about
How old were you when she came around to this?
I think I was about 17.
Okay.
I was in high school, but like towards the later, almost finish. And
so you're like right in the tail end of, I legit don't know who I am. I'm a teenager and I'm freaking out and I have hormones. But sure, let's figure out this identity thing.
Kind of this video camera.
Oh no.
So we never really talked about it. I don't think, and we've talked about it now, and my she's pretty cool. So she's very open to looking and sifting through things from my childhood, from my perspective. Just because we did that, we've done that just in my own therapy that I've done in my own life. It required us to do that. And she was available enough to do that with me. So we talk about it now, and she just, basically has said she was clueless.
Yeah.
She didn't think about that. And
that's fair. I mean,
it's fair. It's totally fair.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Charmaine, aka MixedGirlMane, and I'm jumping into the middle of this episode to remind y'all that on Friday, November 1st at 9:30 p.m., I will be attempting to perform my very first stand-up comedy set at the Ruby Theater in Los Angeles at the Moral Support Show. The Moral Support Show is curated by Marie Watchke, aka Depressed Auntie, who you may remember from episode 6 of Militantly Mixed, Same Colonizer, Wrong Country. Marie puts on this show to help LGBTQ plus and predominantly POC comedians put together a taped reel of their comedy sets so that they can shop themselves around to comedy clubs here in Los Angeles and probably everywhere else. This is actually not an easy thing to get good footage of your sets and to be able to use that to promote yourself. The Ruby Theater is a small black box theater, so we need to pack the house out so that the comedians can feed off of everybody's energy. The more laughter and support that the crowd offers, the better the comedians do. The better the comedians do, the better their taped footage is for shopping themselves out. So please come out in support of all the LGBTQ plus POC comedians and me. I'm not a comedian yet. Hopefully, maybe one day I will be. I don't know. So come on out to the Ruby Theater in Los Angeles on Friday, November 1st at 9:30 p.m. You can purchase tickets at therubyle.com. Make sure you select Moral Support on Friday, November 1st at 9:30 p.m. If you aren't in Los Angeles, or you are and can't attend the show, but you would like to support the show, you can purchase tickets at therubyle.com and then email me to let me know that you are donating your ticket and what name your ticket is in. You can either email me at charmaine@militantlymixed.com. That's S as in Sam, H-A-R, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, E, @militantlymixed.com, or slide into my DMs on Twitter and Instagram @militantlymixed. Let me know the name that the ticket is in and how many tickets you are donating, and we will go ahead and give them to someone who would like to attend but can't afford to. The tickets are $10. Again, that is therubyle.com. Look for the Moral Support Show on Friday, November 1st at 9:30 p.m. I'll put a link in the show notes for the Ruby Theater, but yeah, come out, support the LGBTQ plus POC comedians, and support your favorite mixed race podcaster at an attempt to do something she's always wanted to do, but has no idea if she has that skill set. I'll let y'all know next week how it goes. Bye!
Hey everybody, this is me, slightly annoyed mixed chick, checking in to see how everyone's doing and to tell you that I'm back from my wedding/sanity hiatus. Now that I'm back, I'm working on brand new content and can't wait to share it with you guys. This time around, I'm pulling more from my personal experiences and not just social commentary. Don't worry, I'm still going to cover the happenings in the world. Stop on my blog, take a peek, read a little, and then reach out and let me know what you think. Your feedback is not only welcome, it's also what keeps me going. You can find me at my blog, www.slightlyanoyedmixedchick.com, and on my Insta page, also under Slightly Annoyed Mixed Chick. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, like it's a hard thing to expect anybody, even those who do realize that they're stepping outside of a norm, you know, by interracial dating or marriage or babies, but still just not be prepared for the fallout that comes with it, you know. I mean, it can happen on a class level, rich marrying poor.
Yeah,
it can happen on a race level, you know, all kinds of ways in which this happens. And I do think there are times when some people do get kind of put into a big bubble of you should have known, but we need your generation to exist for the we should have known to start happening. I think by the time I come around, you know, I'm born December 77. So like 10 years and like 4 or 6 months or so after loving. And by that point, I feel that my parents should have known, because they were mixed. They should have been like, you know what, my mom never told me, or you know what, like maybe you're feeling this way too. Whereas like my mom wanted me to be Black. My Japanese and white mom tried to make us as Black as possible. And she loved Blackness. And she... Oh,
yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, so she's a Black hairstylist, you know, that kind of thing. She's had a clientele of 30 years. Whereas my dad, who was Black presenting, half a Brit, wanted to be white. And he sought out women that were... It just so happened that both my mother and his wife and my half siblings, they were also mixed women, but they were white and something. So white and Mexican, white and Japanese, Italian and Mexican, and white and Japanese. So like he sought that out because I think he was trying to thin that out. And I think my dad was totally relieved that we came out lighter brown versus his color brown. And whereas my mom was like, man, I wish you were darker. And I was like, yeah, but you went with a biracial dude who was like a medium tone dude. It could have gone any way.
Would she have been equipped to guide you if you had been darker?
I don't know. No. I don't think she would have been. I mean, she was barely able to deal with it here because like when I was dealing with stuff, so my facial features code Black. Yeah. My skin codes Latin, basically. So most people think I'm Dominican because I'm yellow and brown, but is your face Black? What's going on with your face? You know, basically that's the thing. And so a lot of people think I'm Dominican because of all the Latinx cultures. Dominicans really do present sort of ambiguously Latin, but with Black features. So that's the one that makes the most sense. I get Puerto Rican a lot too, but Dominican seems to be the one that most people, and a lot of Dominicans are shocked to find out I'm not Dominican. Like that's usually the thing. It was like, there's no way you're not Dominican. It's got to be in there somewhere. And I'm like, well, no, Black plus Japanese and white equals Dominican. Like that's what it looks like. And I mean, it's a whole part of my life. Like and the funny thing is I don't know much about Dominican culture, but every time I find out someone's Dominican, I like instantly feel kindred, even though I have. It's only because people have called me Dominican my whole life. It's just one of those things. Yeah. And so looking the way I do, the Black people always identified me. And so my dad besides me looking like the spit of my dad, if people came up to me, it was like, oh, you could tell that's a little mixed girl. He'd be like, she's, you know, he would always kind of emphasize that I was Japanese or white, you know, like he would say other things and he wouldn't really talk about the Black stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but also my name is Charmaine Latrice. So like,
so your dad had like a healthy amount or unhealthy amount of internalized oppression, sounds like.
He did. He really, really did. I think he loved his mother more than he loved his father. You know, in a lot of cases, a lot of us have traumatic experiences with our fathers, and in his case, he did as well. So he preferred his mother in terms of parenting and everything like that. And he wanted to emulate her a lot. You would see it pop up and there was a lot of self-hate, but then he would move us to Black neighborhoods. And I couldn't tell, like, I've always just wondered why, if you're so uncomfortable around Black people, why are you always moving us here? And then it's not until I'm an adult that I start to realize like, oh, was this kind of the only place he could buy a house? Or, Was this that he can, things like that. There was things that I'm starting to understand now as an adult may have been an issue for him. But you can always tell when it bothered him that people just accepted him as Black. That he went through a period of time where he totally embraced it. But in a very weird kind of way of like his code switch was, this is very strange to admit out loud. I don't think I've said it on the show at all yet. When my dad performed Black, it made me very uncomfortable. It seemed so false. And in fact, like, I always kind of viewed my dad as a bit of a racist because of what his performative Blackness was versus just like being who he was, a Black presenting man. Like there was something there. The flip side of that, and this is the part that I'm a little bit more uncomfortable to admit, but I'm going to go ahead and do it, is that my mom, being Japanese and white, and even though she drives me crazy sometimes when she tries to speak hood speak and things like that, because I know that that's what she views as Blackness, I would find it slightly less uncomfortable. Oh gosh, I hate that I'm admitting this. I would find it slightly less uncomfortable when my mom would be sort of performative hood than when my dad would be. Like that's how much they coded.
That's very interesting. Why do you think that it was more upsetting for you when your dad did it?
Having not really tackled this issue yet, I don't 100% know, but I'm going to say that a lot of it had to do with, though my dad presented Black and though I knew my dad was my Black parent, he was so performative white. Like his normal code was perceived as a white behavior type of thing.
Mixed?
He was mixed. Yeah, he was. But
so was it coding?
See, this is, I haven't really investigated it. I just had my teenage angst about it.
People and coding. I have a theory about mixed people and coding. I don't think we code switch.
You don't think we code switch?
No, I think that we just
like it's just our code.
Around. Yeah, I think our code is moving around.
That's interesting. That's definitely something to investigate.
I mean, not for everybody, but I mean, my whiteness is not something that I code switch into.
Right. Like you grew up in.
I'm not comfortable code switching into kind of Blackness. That feels completely foreign to me. So that would be sort of.
And I think that's what we're.
My kids would die if they saw me doing something.
No, I think there's something there. Absolutely. So in thinking about my father, yes, he did grow up around both of his parents. But they, like I said, they were broken up by the time I came around. My parents were also teen parents. So both of my grandparents were dealing with divorces around the time I was born. A little bit prior, but around the time I was born. So, so they are dealing with I know that I'm kind of a direct result of some of this stuff too, because my mom was being abused by her father. She wanted to get kicked out of the house. My dad and his father used to have an abusive relationship, and he was kind of irritated. My dad suggested they have a baby. My dad was 16. My mom was 14. She gets pregnant.
Oh my goodness.
I was a planned teen pregnancy. And the goal of the teen pregnancy was to get kicked out of the house so that they could be adults. So
that is like such a teenager plan, Charmaine.
It's such a teenage plan, right? Like versus just fucking run away, kids. Like just do that. No, we need to get kicked out.
That is such a teenage plan.
So let's bring a whole ass human. Yeah, it's their nightmare. But so yeah, they I'm a planned teen pregnancy. I'm a result of a first time. Certainly with my mom. Yeah. I don't actually know about if I was my dad's first time, but I'm a result of a first time. I'm a result of a planned teen pregnancy. I was a plan, an escape plan, and my parents. Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah. But my parents, like, my dad, at that point, he was with his mom more. And so I view my dad as more of like the British side of his family, even though he presents Black. and his siblings are all a varying degree of, they're all mixed people, but like some of them seemed blacker, quote unquote, you know, and some of them seemed whiter, quote unquote.
Was that because they had embraced blackness, or had access to family members who were black, or in black culture?
The military aspect of it does allow for them to be around a lot of blackness. And in fact, like my Nana was in a social circle of a bunch of British women who were married to black men. So there was like a Scottish lady and a couple of English people, some Welsh people, and they were always around us growing up. Like she had this social circle of these Brits that, you know, loved black men, you know, and the husbands that brought them here weren't necessarily the only black men that they had in their lives too. Like it was, that was their whole ass thing. So I think like I think my dad attaching more to his British side or his mother's side was a way for him to seem better. So my Nana would be what the British equivalent to an uppity woman would be, like, you know, the way we call black women uppity. She is a low-born Brit who pretends an air of highborn Brit because she's like, Americans aren't going to know the difference. She worked on her accent so that she went from the more low-class accent to the higher-class accent. And so she's here in California speaking with her, you know, British accent and being admired for this. And so this is what my dad is seeing. So I think my dad's code, if we're going to go that way, was more of a mixed person who grew up in whiteness, even though he had access to blackness. You know what I'm saying? Like in the 70s, he had a big afro and all that kind of stuff. But he was still, at the end of the day, he preferred or thought whiteness was better. And so he went that way.
Well, I can completely understand that. I mean, I don't know that I made a conscious decision that whiteness was better. It was all like survival for me.
It was also what you were around.
Yeah, it was what I was around. But like, you know, I learned early on, and I couldn't even tell you exactly why. Well, I could. That blackness was bad, that I was not, that, you know, that was not something that I should align myself with. Because everybody that I was around, even though they considered themselves to be, and they probably were like progressive and liberal, and my grandparents were Democrats, and they all hung out with, you know, totally progressive people, they were still had all of their biases against black people, hardcore, heavy biases that they never even would think of examining, because they're like, oh, we don't see color. No, that's all done. You know,
that is the unfortunate side of a liberal white person, is because of their being liberal, they don't realize or pay attention to their biases. And so they just dismiss that they even exist while they are operating with those at play. It's crazy.
Exactly. It's really crazy. And so I can understand just as a mode of survival and being able to stay safe.
Yes, probably was going on with
aligning yourself with what is around you. Yeah. It's a very precarious space.
I wonder too, like if you were, say, pulled from your white side and around more of your black side, what experience that would have done as well. Because when you do look sort of more like people, are you more embraced, or are you still looked at as different because also you have this upbringing and, you know, and the white side, you know, everybody I talk to has a totally different experience who depending on who they grew up around. The different varying levels of acceptance, because even my white presenting biracial people, the white people are like, I know there's something different about you, you know, like that kind of thing is still at play there.
My dad's family, they're from Chicago, and they were always, you know, sort of halfway interested in, well, I wouldn't even say halfway. My dad was always like with these white women. And I think they were like, but why does he keep doing this? You know? It wasn't, I think if my mom had like tried to incorporate me into their lives, they would not have ever rejected me.
Okay.
But she didn't try. I wish she had, because I feel like I was sort of deprived.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I'm like, why would you do that? How could you? I don't know. There's just a high level of unawareness to not understand that even if you have a problem with my Black dad, that I need his family in my life.
You need his family, yeah.
I need them. Absolutely. I mean, to be alone. I mean, I did have my brother who's also mixed, and we were like boy-girl version of each other, you know, in terms of our skin. Yeah. We looked alike when we were little, and we're close in age, and we spent a lot of time together. And I do think that makes a difference to have somebody, just one other person on the planet with you, who's with you all the time, who looks like you.
There's so many guests that I've had that it's just them and their one sibling, and they're like, it was just the two of us against the world.
Yeah,
like we didn't, no one else understood each other but us. What about cousins? Did you have white cousins?
Yeah, not a lot, but
not a lot.
I have white cousins, and they live on the East Coast, so we were never.
So you didn't even play around them, okay?
No,
because that was going to be another question. Is like, how did they view and treat you? So is this a what? Okay, I'm legit about to ask kind of a question based out of ignorance. Is this a white thing that white people don't have that many cousins? Because my husband also doesn't have cousins. Like a lot of the white people I know don't have cousins.
Aren't you just supposed to have 2 kids? Isn't that the rule?
So that's weird because like my whole family, like my dad's side of the family, my dad is one of 6, and so you know, like so I grew up around just like cousins. And then I had an uncle who would disappear every couple of years and come back with new kids and just be like, oh, this is your cousin. So we just like fucking had kids all the time on my dad's side. And we were always around each other. It's weird because as adults, we don't really engage except for on Facebook, and we don't see each other. But like we grew up around each other a lot. And having those other like pale, ambiguous people faces kind of look like yours. Like my boy cousin who's a year younger than me, we look alike. But he looks light-skinned Black.
Oh, really?
And so, like, side by side, and we're a year apart. We are the twin cousins. We look alike. We're a year apart. We had this thing of, like, you and me look alike, even though we're different colors. So I think my understanding of mixedness, whether it was on, like, a real deliberate, you know, like a real obvious level or a real kind of subconscious level was, oh, all of us are like this because these were the people I was around. So it wasn't until I was plucked out of that environment and dropped into a white school where I was like, oh, like white people don't have cousins and everybody looks like them. Like that's what, how do you tell us apart? How do you tell you guys apart? Like all my cousins were different colors, but we all had the same faces. Like it was just a different, my experience is just a little bit, I think a little bit different than most of the people that I get to talk to. But I keep finding this out because like for me, the cousin thing was the thing that really grounded my understanding of how race is different. You know, like we look like we're from the same family and some of us are the same mix. Like I have 4 cousins that are Black, Japanese, and white on my dad's side. Some of us look Black, some of us look white, most of us look Latin, you know, like, that we just run the gamut of faces, and but the cousin thing really, really helps. But for the folks that I know that grew up around white side, they didn't have cousins, and if they did, their cousins didn't know how to play with them.
That opportunity never arose. So I did not grow up around my cousins. I grew up around my siblings, and I'm super grateful for that because otherwise I would have been in complete whiteness.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad that you had at least a sibling to be able to.
When I was 10, my younger sister was born, and she's also mixed. So that was really important for me. That was really important for me to have other people.
Were you able to be helpful to your younger sister then? In that case, like by the time you're like, hey, I get some of this.
We. Probably, because by the time she was processing and thinking about these things, you know, my mom was also in her multicultural group by then. So,
okay.
So, she was talking about that much, much younger than me. I mean,
I can just imagine how terrifying that video camera situation was for you, having like never dealt with it before, to all of a sudden being like, so what is it like for you?
Yeah, like what? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it was.
So I want to use this as a way to kind of get back in, or get into, segue terribly and awkwardly into the work you're doing right now.
Okay.
I'll definitely be editing some of this out. So coming from this idea of like your mom finally gets that something is at play here that she doesn't understand, and she's investigating the multicultural aspects of the family she's created, and she comes at you with a camera and wanting to say like, let's talk about this, let's deal with this, and you don't have the language for it. How does that experience play into the work that you're doing now in and talk a little bit about what you're doing now with the mixed race coaching that you are
okay, well, I'm a life coach, and I will be certified within the next 2 weeks, so I'm very excited about that. Yeah, really excited about that. And I center my work around mixed people, the healing and empowering of mixed people through coaching mixed people and parents of mixed children. Which is, I don't know, it just seems like when I say those words, I just, it's like
I got
cozying up in it. Yeah, it's like cozying up in my favorite cozy chair with my favorite cozy book,
Right. Yeah.
It just feels like home. And one of the things that I focus on is parents of mixed children. And one of the reasons I focus on that is because of my upbringing.
Right.
And I do think that parents of mixed children have an awareness more than my mom, or more than that generation, the loving generation, about the fact that they're mixing and they're creating a mixed person, and that is different. But I don't know that they're equipped to, how do I want to say this? To nurture a higher level of mixed identity, confidence in mixed people, in their children. Because I think that so often parents, monoracial parents, focus on the mixing rather than the mix. This tiny little beautiful mixed creation. Human, exactly.
I mean, I will say I know plenty of people, and especially in our social circle through academia with my husband, we know a lot of white men who have brown wives. We just do. And all of them, like, they have these kids, and they're these, hybrid little yellow and brown white kids. And they'll say stuff, and I'll notice in the moment, oh, they have a mixed kid. They think their work is done. Like it's almost like they think that having a mixed kid, it's that idea that is so, I can't stand it, when like mixed people are going to change the world and racism is going to be gone. We're going to find other ways to hate. And so with these white men that we know that have these brown and yellow wives, they don't realize there's shit going on with that kid. And
absolutely,
so being around me has opened a couple of their minds where they're like, oh, I didn't even think that was an issue. And I'm like, you need to start reading some books. You need to start talking to some mixed people, because we need you to do better for them. Because like, I'm not having kids or whatever. You do have kids, but you are already like, I remember what it's like to not know. I had my experience. My mixed kids are going to know. You're gonna be able to do that.
It's easier when you're a mixed parent to be able to talk about these things with your mixed kids. But I think it's really important that mixed people we get so much affirmation from other mixed people, because other mixed people understand what we're going through and what we've been through. Parents, monoracial parents, can have the same understanding. The information is out there, and they have a little person who they can talk to, or, a bigger person, their children, that they can talk to and find out what their experiences are. And, there's enough studies or enough mixed people. There's a community where you can get the information.
Right.
So I think it's so important that we as mixed people should not have to sort of affirm and safeguard ourselves just us. I think that families are obliged to do that too.
Yes. Yes.
And that is not like the norm. I don't see that as the norm, with parents feeling like, I made this little mixed person and I need to understand what their life is like.
Yes.
So that I can prepare them to be out in the world as a mixed person. And so that they can feel empowered in the world as a mixed person.
I want monoracial parents of mixed children to feel obligated. Like, I want them to feel in the whatever a positive version of a burden is. I think we need a new word for this.
I know. That's exactly what I'm saying, Charmaine, because I don't like to use the word obliged.
Right. Like, I want it to, we don't have, I cannot find a word. I always say a positive.
It's almost like an invitation to be a part of this mixed community, because the mixed community is like just us, but it isn't, because whenever we talk about being mixed, we always talk about our parents and where we came from and how we grew up.
And
so we always talk about our family, and our family at the same time is not like as involved and invested as we are, and they should be.
Absolutely. I think about this also with transracial adoptions as well. If you are a monoracial white person adopting a brown or yellow baby, you need to be in brown and yellow spaces, especially if those children are monoracial.
There's a whole host of things that you can do to create a loving, safe, empowered environment for your brown child.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's what I'm doing with my coaching, is I have programs that do that.
Yes, I'm so excited. I want to talk about this like all day long. I do. No, you don't understand. Well, yes, you do understand. It's me trying to explain this to white people, where I'm like, you don't get it, but like, yes, absolutely, you understand this thing. It's not the reason why you're doing it. We are in this. Like, I'm 41 years old, and I finally am comfortable. You know what I'm saying? Like, and why am I comfortable? Because I started to find mixed people to talk about. I felt seen. I feel validated. My experience aren't unusual or weird. There are people just like me. It has changed my language. I no longer say I grew up being the different one. I say I grew up in an environment where everybody around me was different from me.
Right.
You know, like, I'm using the lessons I'm learning from all the people that I'm just having conversations with. You know, just conversations about our experiences. I'm learning how to change my language. And now, I mean, I've always embraced my mixedness, but I've struggled in a bunch of different areas. My big pain point still to this day is not being darker, because I grew up in an environment surrounded by dark-skinned people who I thought were beautiful. And I thought, I will never be beautiful because I won't be able to achieve that. So like, that's been my baggage throughout a big portion of my life. And even as a comfortable mixed ass adult, every now and then I see someone like Lupita Nyong'o and I'm like, fuck, I will never be beautiful. You know, like, I have these moments. I don't feel that way all the time, but I have these moments.
Yeah, no, I understand.
But I'm still comfortable in my mixedness. I'm excited about mixedness. I love mixes and I love mixed people. And then I'm just like, well, what do I do with this now? You know, the show is great. And I know that it's giving back to my community because I'm getting responses and emails about the effect that it's having. For sure. So 100%, I know that it's doing good. But in that way in which we're greedy humans, we're just like, well, how do I do more good? Plus, I'm a superhero fan. So like, I'm a comic book girl. So like, I'm trying to be a mixed race superhero out in the streets. And I hear what you're doing and I'm just like, look at a mixed race superhero is doing stuff, like is teaching white people how to braid hair or whatever it is, like the different ways in which you can enrich your mixed kid's life, whatever that is. And it doesn't matter that you're black and white.
About like centering mixedness.
Yes. And that's the word.
Yes.
Changing the language is I never think about centering. You know, it's always that the world is centered around cisgendered white men. And so you just think that's the way. And it's things like it's like saying women and women of color bothers me now because I'm like, what the fuck are we saying as a woman? Just a white woman? Then let's say white woman. Right. If we're going to distinguish a woman of color, let's also say white woman. Like we need to change the way we allow the world to center around whiteness and center around maleness. So I'm so excited. Thank you so much for doing the work that you're doing? Because
I am so excited. I can't even tell you. It's like the one thing. It's just home. It's completely home for me.
Yes.
It's the one thing that when I talk about, I feel better than I've ever felt about anything.
You do, right? You walk around like a little bit lighter when I've had these conversations with other mixed people, like I ride that high. Like even sometimes we do talk about trauma and things that we dealt with. And that's why I end the show the way that I do, asking the question about what we love about being mixed, is because I want us to remember that our whole life isn't tragedy and trauma. Some of it absolutely is. But we can also live and celebrate
superpowers.
And yeah, it's amazing. And I would love to talk further about some of those things. But of course you have dinner and we have gone on way beyond we were supposed to. So you are definitely coming back for another episode, just so you know. Because this is like, you just opened up a whole new world. Like I'm just like ready to get into it. But okay. So since we are coming to the end, let's go ahead and talk about what you love about being mixed. And then just know that we're going to have you back soon. So we can talk about the Italian side, because I'm so excited.
What do I love about being mixed? I love how flexible I am and how open-minded I am and how accepting I am of other people.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from being mixed and living in inhabiting different spaces and learning how to inhabit different spaces safely and securely for myself. And I love that. I love being able to move into different spaces. I love being able to be like, okay, that's different, but whatever, that's okay. I accept that, just from being that, from being different and accepting myself. So I absolutely love being mixed. I think it's cool. And that's what I'm teaching my kids. And that's what I want all people to feel, all mixed people to feel like. They just love being mixed.
Yeah, it really does hurt when I hear that people don't love it. And I understand having complicated relationships to your mixedness. I certainly do, because I'm a quarter colonizer. Or I guess technically half colonizer, but so I have a very complicated relationship to that.
You're a colonizer. You're a quarter colonizer.
Yeah. So because I have a British, I'm half white technically, because my mom's father was white also, but he's like Revolutionary era American. So like their family has been here since the 1700s.
Wow. So
it's also colonizer, but it's been here for a long time colonizer. Yeah, whereas like my grandmother is British as a British woman.
They're like hardcore colonizers.
Right. Like it's in their language. Like that's why I say she's British versus English, because I need you to understand the Britishness comes with colonization.
Absolutely.
If you're like an English person who just like stayed in England forever and you're like, whatever, but boom, I'm just English. That's a different kind. My Nana is British. Yeah. She has come to America to conquer, So yeah, obviously we have complicated relationships with things that we're mixed with. But I still love mix. I love the flexibility, like you say. I love that because of my mixedness, I am able to see things differently than a monoracial person, and can maneuver a space differently than a monoracial person because of it. And maybe that's a benefit to me in most cases, Yeah, it's a wonderful thing
for me. And I didn't realize until I was an adult that those are mixed qualities.
Right.
And
absolutely.
I'm happy to have those qualities, and I'm happy to be mixed. Yeah.
Well, this is wonderful. I feel like I could talk to you all the time. I think this happened the last time when we talked for your coaching thing too. We talked for a long time, and I love to talk, so you're not going to get me to shut up. So you just better tell me you got to go. Just like, I gotta go and hang up and run away. But thank you so much. Why don't you tell everybody how they can follow you on social media before we totally wrap up, and then you can go ahead and
at Sarah Lotus Garrett on Instagram.
Sarah with an H.
Sarah with an H. LOTUS GARRETT. And then I have my website, which is sarahlotus.com, sarahlotus.com.
Okay.
And
all right. Well,
I'm on Facebook, but it's not where my passion lies. So
yeah. Facebook is just something we're on because we have cousins, or at least in my case. But Instagram and Twitter is pretty much where I live.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for this. I'm so excited.
Thank you so
much.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Fury. Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for monthly sponsorship, or paypal.me/militantlymixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed-ass self. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.